What's up? Brandon Lilly here. I'm going to be jumping right back into this. I was about two-thirds of the way done and the YouTube crashed for whatever reason. So, starting over on this, and I apologize for missing a couple of days with sickness. But Casey Davis asked, board presses for raw lifters, yes or no? Uh, Let me preface this with saying shirt benchers, yeah, I think boards are a great tool. And I'm going to explain kind of why through my answer for why I say no for raw lifters. Raw lifters have so much dependency on their arms and their arm positioning from the start to finish to bench. Shirted benchers can make a lot of mistakes from the top to the bottom. And I say this, and you can start a little high, but you're coming down at such a controlled pace, and you have the support under the arms, through the shirt, through the chest, that you can actually make a lot of corrections. A raw bencher doesn't have that ability to make those, you know, drastic corrections, as I'll say. So what you got to look at is when a shirted bencher touches the board, he's able to come down with so much control that he can just touch the board lightly and reverse it. A raw bencher is touching the board usually with a lot of force, especially take somebody who drops the board kind of rapidly, like Dan Green. If he comes down and he touches the board, what happens? When he touches the board, it allows. I'm not saying he does this, but a lot of guys that I see, a lot of beginners especially, will allow their shoulders to retract and they'll try to build momentum to drive up off of the board. They'll actually sink into the board to use it to drive momentum. This is something that I take issue with. Josh Bryant's a big believer in the dead stop bench press. All these things can be used wonderfully if they're used properly. But so many guys have such an ego and they have such a need to lift more weight or a belief that they have to lift more weight in every exercise, they'll leverage themselves under the dead stops just so it's almost like a decline, and they'll use it to press away rather than actually just building what the exercise is designed to do. And that's kind of like the board presses. In a shirt, you can come down to a two board, and the shirt's starting to really lock up right there, so you can touch very comfortably. The one board, you almost have to fight it down. So what I've found for raw lifters works better is just coming down and doing pause presses in those positions. Come down, one, two, press, one, two, press. Learn to drop and catch, like drop very rapidly and catch it in that position, 1 inch off the chest or 2 inches off the chest. And that'll actually allow you to maintain your strongest line, the line that you actually want to bench press in, and that'll create a stronger bench press overall. That's what's helped me. It actually slowed my descent down a little bit to maintain some control, but it's made me very explosive off my chest and very powerful all the way through the lift. So there's a balance there. I mean, like I said, if you're using it perfectly, yeah, but if you're not, I think a pause press is a much better way to go. Michael Hart, ankle flexibility in squatting, use Olympic shoes or try to get more flexible. Well, let's use a real world analogy here. What if you're outside of the gym and you're stepping on a curb and you step on the curb funny? Ankle flexibility is going to play a huge role, right? And you might blow your ankle out because you're not flexible enough to catch if you misstep on the curb. Don't use things in training to mask it. That's my problem with a lot of the guys that jump in gear too early. They're not getting strong, so they say, "Oh, well, I'll just put these briefs on and that'll do this for me, or that'll make this stronger, or this better, or whatever." Instead of going backwards a little bit and working the hard way around and getting back to their normal strength level. Yeah, I encourage you to try the Olympic shoes once your ankles are more flexible, but don't just try to mask what's wrong. Eventually you're going to come back to having the same problems again somewhere else down the road. Derek Stone, best way to strengthen the upper back, rear delts with very limited elbow movement. This is a good question for me because that is how I was taught to train my upper back from Chuck Vogelpohl. He's very, very smart at learning how to isolate muscles in unique ways. So we eliminated barbell shrugs for a lot of reasons because so many guys that round their shoulders in and they don't ever pull back. They only hit just the upper portion of the trap. And we maximize with dumbbells and with the trap bar because the trap bar kind of keeps you in a locked in side position. I took that one step further with the dumbbells, me and Jimmy Harris, and came up with what we called the Lilly shrug, which is I just posted it in a video the other day where you slide the dumbbell down the front of the leg. You come almost into a bend position with straight arms, and then you rotate back out to the side of the hip and pull up and back at the same time. So think about the Arnold press, how you kind of rotate up and around. It's the same motion almost on the front of the leg up to the side of the hip to pull up and back to hit the rear delts, traps, and the lower traps that are so important that very rarely get hit by doing just conventional shrugs. The other thing is taking like an incline bench on a 30-degree angle, using an easy curl bar or a straight bar, and doing the shrugs this way, pulling up and back, hits the rear delts very well as the middle and lower shrug, or lower trap, not the lower shrug. And the other one that Chuck, he has the movement named after him, the Vogapol row, using a straight arm position and starting high, keeping the arms flexed and locked, and lowering the lat pull down to your waist, really blows up the lats, gets a little bit of secondary work into the triceps and the rear delts, but it's really good for the lats. I think those movements will be a good way to keep you training your back, training your back until your elbow flexion gets a lot better. Josh McIntyre, training around low back injuries like a disc herniation. Well, Josh, I give you a lot of credit. I know you're a strong dude. I know you're dedicated, and I know that this has been bugging you for a minute. So what I'm going to recommend to you is doing a lot of the same things, locked in positions, whether they're seated shrugs. That was something that we did with Chuck a little bit when his back was inflamed. Sit on the bench, get like the trap bar where it's under your legs, or even a straight bar if you can, and kind of round forward to it, or have guys put it in your hands and do shrugs that way. Do some side lateral work. Do the stuff where your body position is not going to change, like the incline bench press. You're going to be doing the rear delt work, almost the same things as I told Derek, where your back is not compromised, where it's against something or it's braced in a position to where it's not going to have to do a lot of flexion and a lot of work. If you can build up the lats, the upper back, the rear delts, while your lower back is healing, I think you're going to be better off. Leg press is a really good thing for you. Leg extensions, leg curls, training anything and everything that you can around the area. And then doing things like body weight good mornings, really trying to keep a little bit of tension in your lower back and strengthening those areas as slowly as you can, but strengthening everything else around it the best that you can with movements that don't necessarily bring the lower back into play. So try to find things that support the lower back, like I said, the incline rows, things like that. That's going to keep the back kind of safe. And just take your time. I know it's a struggle. I've had the same things. You want to come back full force, but the problem is powerlifting is a very funny sport in that it's one of the few sports that you can do more of it and get worse at it. It's like if you shoot 1,000 free throws a day, you're going to probably be a better free throw shooter. If you go and do 1,000 squats a day, you're going to beat yourself to death. So take your time. Come back slowly. Come back intelligently, and you'll be a lot better off. Michael Toomer says carry over for sumo stance squats to sumo deadlifts. This is all relative. I think training both positions is a good idea. I always encourage people to train wide stance squats and wide stance deadlifts. Why not? I mean, why have a weak link in your chain? Be as strong as you can in any position possible. Justin Ford, if I had to pick the worst quarterback in the NFL, which would you choose, Flynn or Romo? Man, I don't want football gods to rain on my parade, but man, I really think Romo's using up as many chances as a man should get. But wow, they're both pretty bad. Robert Christopher, how much beard must you have until you become a man? I was a little bit of a late bloomer with the beard. I started getting my beard when I was 10 years old, and started shaving full on every day when I was 11, and ever since then, here we are. Jose Alicia, I hope I said that correctly. I hope your name is not like Joe's Alice. Sorry, that was a bad joke. But anyway, my opinion on using bands and chains on the main three lifts, or do you think just stick with the regular lifts and training and forget the other stuff? Look, let me give the big warning, the big asterisk, the big anti-West Side precautionary statement. Those things work awesome for geared lifters. They work very well for some raw lifters. But in my opinion, the problem with those things is too many people use them too early on. Let's look at a guy like Andre Milanichev, for example. He is at the top of the raw game by far. Um, did over 2,400 pounds. Looks as if he could total 2,500 pounds. Um, and he's never used those things. If he has, it's been very, very limited. Chuck Vogelpohl was one of the first people to start experimenting with those things at West Side Barbell, and he will tell you too many guys jump into them too early. They should milk the barbell for as long as they can.